This is Pronoun Review, Day 1, Part 3. And we're in the back of the page. We've already reviewed the top part in the last screencast, each of the 6 remaining types of pronouns and examples of each. And as I think about how you should be studying and what you should be studying and why you should be studying this, you don't need to be memorizing every single pronoun that's on the list, with the exception of our subject and object pronouns. When we think about having studied our prepositions at the beginning of the year, right now, very few of us, myself included, could sit and write down every single pronoun on a sheet of paper. However, given a sentence, most of us should be able to, at this point, just recognize prepositions in sentences. So we don't have to have every single pronoun memorized to be able to recognize them in a sentence. So what we're going to review now are our indefinite pronouns, and this is the list of pronouns where you have a singular, plural, and then you have a both column, and that's when it gets really tricky. So we look at our first sentence. Do you know anyone who has made their or his or her own Mobius strip? What I'm looking at is, do I want the plural or the singular form of the pronoun? So I've got to find what it is agreeing with. And I find my indefinite pronoun is anyone. And I gave you the clue that if you could remember these ones that end with one or body or thing, that they are always going to be singular. And so we want a singular pronoun in reference to it. Do you know anyone who has made his or her own Mobius strip? I'm talking about anyone as an individual, so that's singular. Many have created this amazing object by first cutting a narrow strip of paper. He or she or they then gave one end a half twist before taping the 2 ends together. My indefinite pronoun here is many. Many is always plural. And so I don't really need to look anywhere in the sentence. I know that plurals have to agree with other plurals. When I look at the next one, most who experiment with a Mobius strip will be astonished by his or her or their experience. Now I've got most, and most can be singular or plural. And so I've got to think about what it is referring to. And I don't see an antecedent. A lot of times you'll have a prepositional phrase following it. And so what I might look at over here is his or her or their experience. Experience is singular, and so I'm talking about his or her experience. Because if it had been experiences, that would be plural, and so that would mean there was plural. And so, again, because experience is singular, I want his or her to be singular, and then most must be singular. The next one, few will fail to notice the strip's behavior does not meet his or her or their expectations. Few is my indefinite pronoun. Few is always plural, and so there is plural as well. Ask someone to draw a pencil line around the outside of the strip. He or she or they will discover that the line also goes around the inside of the strip. So my indefinite pronoun is someone, ends with that one, which indicates that it's always singular, and so I want he or she. Nobody who cuts a Mobius strip into lengthwise will end up with 2 rings. He or she or they will have only 1 ring. Nobody is my indefinite pronoun. Again, it ends with the body. Nobody, somebody, everybody. And so those always indicate singulars. And so I want he or she. Anyone who tries to color one edge of the strip will discover to his or her or their surprise that both edges wind up being colored. Anyone is my indefinite. Anyone is always singular, and so his or her has to be singular. And this last one, many find the Mobius strip mysterious. However, his or her or their questions could easily be answered by a topologist. Many is my indefinite, and again, I don't have a prepositional phrase following it, so I've got to think about how it's being used. His or her there refers back to these, or shows ownership of these questions, which is plural, so there has to be plural, which means many is plural. So that's a quick review of our indefinite pronouns, and that's how you really go about figuring out the correct singular plural form of each of those pronouns. The next part, actually the last part of this, deals with the interrogative pronouns, specifically for who and whom. And we had a strategy that we used for each of these because it's very confusing whether you use who or whom. And we were substituting two of our subject and object pronouns in here. We would substitute he for who and him for whom. And we selected he and him because him ends with an M and whom ends with an M. And so hopefully that would be a little bit easier to remember. So anytime we have he or who or whom, we're going to substitute in these pronouns, and that should help us figure it out a little bit, which is the right form of the interrogative pronoun. Now when we look at a question, sometimes we have to rearrange it a little bit as if we were answering the question to make it make sense. So our first one says, who or whom was the first man to walk on the moon? So if I was going to restate that, I would say he was the first man, or him was the first man to walk on the moon. Since I would say he, then I want who. To who or whom am I speaking? To he am I speaking, or to him am I speaking? Now that sounds a little bit awkward, so I might restate that. I am speaking to he, I am speaking to him. And him is the right answer, and so I want whom. Who or whom did Abraham Lincoln choose as the general of the Union Army? Did Abraham Lincoln choose he, or did Abraham Lincoln choose him? And so since him would be the right answer, then I would use whom did Abraham Lincoln choose. By who or whom was that song written? That song was written by he. That song was written by him. So, whom? Who or whom will you invite to your birthday party? You will invite he to your birthday party. You will invite him to your birthday party. Since you invite him, then you want whom. Who or whom went with Robert Peary to the North Pole? He went with Robert Peary, or him went with Robert Peary? He went with Robert Peary, so I want who. Who or whom was the first to find a pass through these mountains? He was the first to find a pass, or him was the first to find a pass? He was the first, so we'd say who was the first. Who or whom did you ask to feed the cats while we are away? Did you ask he to feed the cats? Did you ask him to feed the cats? So the answer would be whom did you ask, because we would substitute him. Do you know who or whom the Secretary of State is? He is the Secretary of State, or him is the Secretary of State? Who or he is the Secretary of State? Who or whom did the British elect as Prime Minister? Did the British elected he as Prime Minister? The British elected him as Prime Minister. Him tells us that the right answer is whom. So this gets a little bit more complicated as to what job who and whom is doing in the sentence, but for right now, I will be happy with you just being able to learn this strategy, which I think would help you a little bit more than knowing the jobs right now. Okay, so this is the end of day 1, part 3.